it's really fitting that the Carpenters visited the Nixon White House and were declared Young America at its best.
May 1st, 1973 was a real big surprise. And oh my God, it was a magnificent thing that happened. We were invited at the White House, to the White House by President Nixon, and William Brandt was the guest from Germany. It was just a magnificent play. We played in the East Room, not too many songs, just enough to give everybody a taste. There was lots of Marines dressed in beautiful costume. Oh my God, I could have taken a few home. Anyway, but Karen, you know, she never really got nervous about it, but this time she was a little antsy because it wasn't a stage, it was a room.
We think that tonight, having the Carpenters, one of America's finest young group in America, entertain us is most appropriate. The Carpenters, ladies and gentlemen.
I think it's really fitting that the Carpenters visited the Nixon White House and were declared Young America at its best because, you know, in many respects, I think that they sonically embodied that Sun Belt optimism that Nixon ran on from the beginning, that kind of nostalgia, that kind of California Sun Belt feeling, that, you know, the kind of triumph of suburban America, and, you know, now and then coming out at the same time that they were doing that, I think, is part of what alienated them to a lot of rock critics and may have also damaged their reputation for a moment there, like in perpetuity, because people thought that they were advocating only for, you know, these mainstream American values at a time when the nation was in crisis.
This is an aftermath of the president's follow-up to the Watergate message.
Good evening. I want to talk to you tonight from my heart on a subject of deep concern to every American. In recent months, members of my administration and officials of the Committee for the Re-election of the President, including some of my closest friends and most trusted aides, have been charged with involvement in what has come to be known as the Watergate affair.
I don't think anybody paid attention. You know, being on the road, your music, in and out of hotels, up and down on the planes, nobody pays attention to the news. If I was at the hotel with Karen, she would be watching I Love Lucy or something, or Carol Burnett or something. So, you know, we didn't know about Watergate, and it was like almost in full bloom. And I remember Karen saying how Richard Nixon, you had to go through to the line, you know, of and the Marine would escort you, and the Marine coaches you, tells you what to say and how to introduce yourself. And Richard Nixon would go, "I like your music. You're a good musician," or something like that. "But I like your music." And Karen would make fun of that and say, "See," he said, "your music is good," you know. But the way he did it with his hand was, anyway. But no, we were not aware of the Watergate thing and all that. But you know, like I said, we were in a different world, so that was another gig for us. But it was just a fancier one, you know.
You know, it seemed like almost a disconnect, or speaking for a member of the populace that wasn't necessarily the album-buying, music-listening crowd, you know, who you associate with as like kind of hardcore music fans, but their parents instead. I don't know that they, you know, would have ever completely appealed to the hipsters of the era, the people who saw themselves as standard bearers of the counterculture. But also at that time in America, I think, you know, the U.S. was coming out of some of the crises that it had been experiencing from the late 60s into the mid 70s, and everybody was curious about what would happen next. Sing and its boundless optimism, and again, its kind of saccharine hokiness, presented one possibility and one vision for that future, one that was less bleak, perhaps, than some of the other ones that were circulating. Though I think that it was in keeping, if a little bit more over the top, it was in keeping with some of the good vibes and moods that were starting to permeate into music at the time. Yesterday Once More, I think, is a song that speaks to the way the Carpenters have been seen as an act that erases all of the trouble and difficulty from the 60s, all of that tumult, all of the angst, because it's a throwback to a simpler time. And it speaks about their desires to go back to a simpler time, times that may not have actually ever existed. You know, what is that yesterday once more that they're longing for? And I guess it's a time before music was so political, or music seemed incendiary in a way. And the songs that they covered in those medleys on that album really, I think, tried to be, it tried to recast a sense of music as, a recreation and not some sort of political statement. And I think that may have misaligned them with certain prevailing sentiments at the time.